Hello and welcome to this second of 5 webinars in our series focusing on racial inequality in maternal health care. My name is Hannah Travis and I am an Associate Solicitor in the Women's Health Team at Bulk Bed and Kemp. I will be hosting some of these webinars along with Olivia Beauchar, who you all have met at our first webinar. And a very, very warm welcome to you all today for taking the time to join us. We know how very valuable your time is and we very much appreciate you joining us today, so thank you. I am very delighted to welcome today's speaker, Elsie Gayle, alongside a previous client of Elsie's, who, to remain anonymous, we will respectfully refer to as Sakina. Many of you will know Elsie and the wonderful work that she does. Elsie is a practicing midwife with over 30 years of experience in the NHS. She is currently in private practice with significant and international experience. And along with the Mimosa Midwives group practice, she facilitates and manages the delivery of culturally safe maternity care. We are very grateful to both Elsie and Sakina and very fortunate to have them speaking to us all today. In today's webinar, Elsie and Sakina will be talking to us about the impact of maternity, continuity of care on both mother and midwife, and the journey they took together. After the talk, there will be a question and answer session. So please, throughout today's session, please put all your questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, and we will come to them all at the end. And just to let you know, these webinars will also be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent out to all attendees after the session today, and especially for those who couldn't make it today. And it will also be put on our website for all to find later on. And without further ado, I am very pleased now to hand over to Elsie Gayle. Thank you, Elsie.
Thank you, Hannah, for that lovely introduction. I want to thank you for inviting us to share our experiences. And I also want to just thank the team, primarily Yvonne White, who is my closest working partner, who was my manager in the NHS and then came out to join me in private practice. I also want to thank the Mimosa Midwives, of which there are 5, and then aspiring midwives beyond that. We have a patron, Leslie Page, who we're so grateful for to share her knowledge, experience, and so on. And our PMA, Mrs. Andrea Batty, who gives us guidance, support, and we share things together. So it's really good to have the support of our colleagues. Sakina, of course, is very important to this talk, and I really want to thank her for being brave enough to share her journey as we go. So then, because the whole picture of maternity services and its impact isn't well known, I just want to start by saying we want to understand a little bit about the complexity of the issues we face as mother and midwife going through the maternity journey. We want to look a little bit at midwifery, the structures that surround midwifery and midwifery practice, the evidence that we have to work with, and then finally the journey to a solution. So looking then at the midwife, who is she or he or they? Because we're looking in terms of people's gender. We have the rise of the non-binary agenda and the importance of inclusion. So the midwife is recognized as a responsible and accountable professional who is autonomous, who works within regulation, who delivers care right across the health spectrum. So health counseling, education. She works in all spheres, the home, the community, hospitals, clinics. And I've actually worked on the roadside in an emergency. So she works anywhere that she's required to. Midwifery is the profession of midwives. Only midwives practice midwifery, and we have a unique body of knowledge, skills, and professional attitudes which are drawn from various disciplines. So there's quite a lot of information in terms of the role, the scope of the midwife in the International Confederation of Midwives website. Their website is quite comprehensive. So a little bit then about the structures around midwifery practice. Midwives first became regulated in 1902. First of all, we started off with a central midwives board, which was made up of doctors and midwives, so mainly men and some women. We then got subsumed into the United Kingdom Central Council, where the midwifery became amalgamated with nursing, although remaining separate within that body. And then we further were put into the Nursing and Midwifery Council. So that is the current council which regulates nurses, midwives, health visitors. Then there's the issue of professional indemnity insurance. Initially, as independent practitioners, we were not required to have indemnity insurance. There was private insurance available at a point, but then inside the NHS, the clinical negligence schemes for trusts, versions 1, 2, and now 3, have set out how it is that midwives work with indemnity, and it is actually illegal to work without indemnity right across the board. But the problem for us now is the indemnity surrounding birth, which there is only one company, one private company, which is able to have indemnity insurance through private means. But the indemnity insurance is actually a big issue for childbearing mothers, persons who birth, and midwives who practice. Technology is also a main feature, in as much as the technology has grown exponentially. Some of it is evidence-based, some of it is used in ways that are not compatible with the needs and desires of women, and some of it is very valuable, without which we would not want to do. National policy has guided our practice, and to be honest, many policies have been sitting on shelves. So they are researched, they're put together and put out, and then they end up sitting on the shelves because they have not been able to be fully implemented. The current policy actually just now is Better Births, which incorporates continuity of care as a model for use in midwifery. Midwifery research, thankfully, has grown, with midwives becoming more interested in becoming researchers, academic researchers. So we have very good midwifery research now ongoing. And that's been going for a number of years now, with more and more midwives undertaking research to do with midwifery and midwifery practice. But also, we are now required as midwives to use research in our work towards best practice. Midwifery education started off in midwifery schools and then progressed to working in universities. So midwives are now educated at university level and progress to doing PhDs and such. The NHS employer is the main employer of midwives now, primarily because women have already paid for their maternity care. The NHS gives a guaranteed employment as a midwife. You are given insurance protection, and it is by and large a safe way to work as a midwife within the NHS systems. The shifting sands, though, in terms of midwifery employer is that there have been quite a lot of reorganizations right across the board, some of which have impacted midwives negatively and some for the benefit. We have protocols and policies and guidelines within which we have to work. Moving on then, in terms of the workplace issues that impact midwifery practice, there is a lot of bullying and harassment. This has been ongoing for a very long time and has been the subject of inquiries, reviews, people's PhD work, and now it's actually coming to the forefront now for remedy within the NHS, as well as outside of the NHS, whereby groups are taking on the issues to resolve bullying and harassment because it actually creates a toxic workplace. The increase in workload as technology has risen and the rate of tasks that midwives have had to take on without releasing some of their own tasks, the amount of documentation that has been required now, because the notes, the client notes, the patient notes are needing to be kept in some detail and for a number of years, up to 25 years. These things are really important that we document well. Within the system, we have intercollegiate racism and shadism. So we have right across the board issues of race that impact, and then within race, which shadism, which is not really well recognized, but somebody of light skin versus somebody of darker skin, people who do not speak English as their first language, and these are the sorts of things that arise out of racism and shadism. Many midwives have complained of lack of career progression because they are not white. And then we do see that there are disparate regulatory referrals to the NMC simply because people are not white. The NMC has actually recognized it and has begun to do some work around that issue. One of the phrases that are coming out now are the issues of white saviorism, where people who really would like to do something about racism or the ill treatment or the disparate treatment, who are white, of European descent, in their own efforts are sometimes being described as white saviors, which is, it does not sit well with people who are very conscious around the issues of racism. We actually work in hierarchical systems inside the NHS, and midwifery has actually been, instead of being a level profession, it has actually taken on the hierarchical way of working. So we have directors of midwifery, heads of midwifery, divisional leads for midwifery, and so on. And they seem to have more importance than the frontline, hands-on clinical midwife. That's actually changed over time to create issues where we have hierarchies in organizations. The constant NHS reorganizations I've mentioned before, and that's actually caused quite a lot of confusion and frustration amongst the profession. And a lot of people just gave up trying to keep up with the things that were going on in terms of the change in NHS. The authoritative voice is another issue that has come really to the fore. And I've actually experienced that, because even though we have the evidence to show that things need to change and some things are better than some, the people with the power at the top of the hierarchical system are the ones who actually do not want to hear, do not listen, do not want to change. But actually that impacts also, again, when the midwife who has power over the client or the patient, if the person is a patient, they are seen as the authoritative voice. So that actually can mar the relationship that needs to develop in order to give safe care. So in terms of what is going on in midwifery over a number of years, I mean, this has not just happened now, it's been going on for a very long time. Gradually, we have lost the ability to control our working. If you think back to the ICM definition of a midwife, autonomous profession, we've lost the ability to control our working lives as consummate professionals. And that's actually led to the denigration and the neglect of the midwife and her role within society and the health economy, to the detriment of herself, the profession, and society at large, including the families that she looks after. One of the midwives, I mean, when it came to my attention that things were so wrong, one of the midwives I had a conversation with, somebody who I'd worked with, who was she was such a good midwife, kind, considerate, dedicated. She said to me, I mean, I'm still to this day, she said, I was becoming a monster. I'm a single woman. I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, my mortgage, run my car, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I think I'm losing my mind. And she left. To be honest, I have no idea where she is now. She tried for a while to do a bit of work as an independent midwife, but the lack of the ability to have a regular income, which is what the NHS gives you, she had to turn to something else. So when we look at the backstory, you know, where does all of this sit? And it actually sits within colonialism, slavery, indentured labor, certainly in the United Kingdom and other European nations, within the building of empires, which for some people, it was great because a lot of people made a lot of money on the back of the building of their empires. But for others in the society, it was to their detriment. So what we see is things like this chattel slavery, and then coming forward now into modern day, we have the Commonwealth nations who are coming to the mother country, so to speak, immigration, and we still see it now where international recruitment of healthcare staff into the NHS as a result of the shortage that we have here now. The other thing to contemplate is the issue of the maternal death rates in the United Kingdom. I know that this is a long-standing issue because I have been following this for a very long time. It certainly came to my attention in 2001 when I returned to the United Kingdom to work as a midwife. And I was looking at how things had changed, trying to upskill myself, update myself in terms of working, using research and so on. And what I found was that the maternal death rates were very disparate as far as we were concerned as people who were not white. The confidential inquiry into maternal deaths in this country is a fantastic opportunity to look at how we're functioning as a service. But I do have some hesitations about how these things are being collated. So for example, I myself, I have a mixed heritage, and I would question how we can differentiate between Black and mixed race people. So if you, and I would be inclined to combine them simply because many of us who are of mixed race identify as people of African descent, as Black. So if you look at these statistics in particular, which looking at 2014 to 2016 outcomes, if you combine the Black and the mixed race together, what you see is a huge disparity in terms of people of African descent or who identify as African descent, and Asian, white, and others. The other thing to actually look at is what is currently being highlighted. So very sadly, we've had this pandemic situation within which many of services have been constrained, cut out, reduced, certainly face-to-face visits have been reduced. And then the response of the situation in terms of mortality rates for mothers, for babies, the fear factor, the treatment, or the what people receive as treatment, or how they perceive their treatment in terms of their maternity care and other care, but certainly we're talking about maternity care today. We have seen a rise in free births, and that has not been well documented. But the other thing I wanted to highlight is the fact that the morbidity, I was speaking to Professor Brian Jarman some time ago about morbidity. How do we measure it? Because some morbidity is so serious. So for example, people who have babies who have a slight brain damage at birth or around the time of birth through negligence or accident, it may not actually come to light until they're in their teen years or beyond. And we know it certainly made me think about young Black men. What happens to them? You know, they have really worse outcomes when they hit the mental health system, as well as other systems like the educational system and so on. So we do identify, or we are able to identify some morbidity in terms of how people are nurturing, whether women have good mental health or not, how are they managing, and then in terms of family life and so on. In fact, in terms of the first 1,001 days, which is when we are imprinted for life, but also it's imprinted into the DNA and beyond, down the generations, what we find, certainly in the Black community, that's being highlighted now, is that we are, in the words of Dr. Velma McClymont, Jamaican academic, we are being blighted on the vine, from the womb to the tomb and beyond. So then, in the light of this, Yvonne White and myself began a journey. Yvonne used to be my manager in the NHS. She's a highly experienced midwife, having run or led a continuity of carer scheme inside the NHS in a large NHS acute unit, and then managing a delivery suite and sometimes the whole unit itself. I've only been a frontline clinician, having stepped back from career progression to nurture my children within white society. Absolute implications around that. So together we have been on this journey, and this actually was basically the start of our journey, where we were looking at how do we develop a model of care that matches best evidence in order to improve the outcomes for people for whom we were caring. So I think we came second in this, this competition that we undertook. And what we've done is to just use small pots of money that we've got along the way and actually maximizing all the opportunities we've had in order to develop the way of working for Mimosa Midwives. So continuity of care is the model that we are looking at today because of its ability to be matching our needs right across the board, whoever we happen to be, in all aspects, mind, body, and soul. We have choice, control, autonomy, dignity. It's trauma-informed, and we develop therapeutic relationships with women and clients. We have embedded these principles on the right of the screen, that of cultural safety. We use the Montgomery judgment to its absolute max, the Arnstein's ladder, and Semmelweis is the doctor who discovered that if people wash their hands, first line principle, simple as anything, first line principles, we apply first line principles in order to get best outcomes. So that's where we're at in terms of the simplicity of our working. We have to really understand what's going on so that we can apply the basics in order to have good outcomes. We also fully embed the NHS policy on patient and public involvement, where we put the patient, the client, the person at the center of their needs, along with their family, and then we deliver care which is congruent to their needs and values. And within that, as I said earlier, Better Birth, which is the extant maternity policy now for England, continuity of care is a model that's been recognized to achieve the best outcomes, where therapeutic relationships are actually developed and used as such. So continuity of care, some people are saying, well, continuity of care, and you know, we will achieve good outcomes. But if I am honest, you can receive continuity of care from somebody who is racist, or indeed continuity of care from somebody who doesn't recognize what they're doing within power structures, the structures within which they're being given to work, and the outcomes can be horrendous if you just have continuity of care by itself with no thought to what actually it is you're doing. So the cultural safety aspect of our working is really fundamental to how we deliver care. It is a concept which was developed in New Zealand by a Maori nurse who recognized that the Maori, despite having the same treatment as the white New Zealanders, were having the worst outcomes. So she went on this journey to develop this concept, which became embedded into nursing education, but it also has been taken up across organizations. So it can be applied individually, within groups, or certainly within organizations and society right across the board. And we've chosen this because cultural safety is a nicer sounding word to racism, but basically it's addressing the same. So it influences the structures which have a significant impact on health, and recognizes that we cannot ignore that, because that is part of the issue, that why we're having these disparities in health. Cultural safety looks at power structures, and it actually gives the power to the client to define the quality of their experience and what it is that they need. So they're able to choose whether the service is safe for them to use. Some of the issues that are being addressed now are like rituals, and people are trying to define people's culture and work with people's culture. But the truth of the matter is, when you look at the history, if you think back to the backstory that I was trying to share, a lot of people don't understand people's experiences, where these things are coming from, the power that is given to some people and removed from some people. It doesn't take into account the historical effects and the socioeconomic status, according to Iri Hapeti Ramsden in 1996. And just to read the last statement, it says it is concerned with the transfer of power from service providers to healthcare consumers, addressing the needs and the issues of power imbalance. The importance of this in terms of the need to examine dominant power structures and how they impact on health, both within and between groups, has been recognized by a number of commentators. So this is our business model on a page. And there are 5 of us in the main. There are 15 other midwives who really would like to come on board. And we have aspiring midwives and women and people who would like to have our services. We're working in very different ways. Some of us lecture at universities. Some of us are working with doulas, training doulas. Yvonne and I are working the clinical. We're developing ways and understanding, trying to refine the ways of working and how we work with. We have a mother voice led by a woman who we gave pro bono care to. We support free birthers who want antenatal support. And we had been doing some aquinatal in terms of helping women who were gestational diabetics or diabetics to have some exercise, as well as giving parent information sessions within that for women and their partners as well, or birthing people and their partners. The website, very sadly, the chap who does our website had a stroke, and so the website is not up to date, but you're very welcome to have a look at that when you get a moment. So then, looking towards going forward, we are hoping to be commissioned within the NHS, simply because many of the women we wish to care for or have been requested to care for cannot afford to pay 6, 7, 8, 14,000 pounds for their maternity care. And we're at the moment just having discussions as to how we can get ahead with that, because that would certainly improve the outcomes. And what we're finding is that even though the evidence is so clear, there's been a lot of research done around the model of continuity of care. A lot of people are not interested, they're not wanting to, and these are some of the reasons I put on the screen as to perhaps why. It would be interesting to hear, if anybody in the audience actually has any suggestions as to is there anything different going on in terms of why it is that we can't get this on board. And just to say that this model is not for everybody. Not all birthing people want it. Not all midwives can work it. So for example, if you've got young children, you're on call 24/7 from the time of the person going at 37 weeks until they birth. You are on call. So it defines a way of working that is not the usual NHS style of working. We've developed it in a way that meets the needs of the people who are working it, but also the people who want it. So I just want to talk very briefly about the journey we took with our client, Sakina. Different race to ourselves. So it was Yvonne and myself looking after this lady and her family. One of us led for Sakina, the other one was backup. We journeyed together to get to know and to understand what her needs were. Some of them we learned as we went along by being with the family, and all this is done over time. Very timely visits, listening, lot of listening, sharing, suggestion, taking into account her particular family needs, flexible with visiting times. And then I think the thing that was really, really a learning for me, this was the first time she birthed at home. This was the first time that I was part of a birth that took place within a prayer. So the baby was born during a prayer. That for me was just, I was totally blown away by that. Focused on helping her, but definitely taking in the whole scenario, the whole atmosphere, the feel, the spirituality of the birthing process, which is what she chose for herself. It was an absolutely awesome journey, certainly from a midwifery perspective. So I just want to step back now and hand over to Sakina to share her story of the journey.
Hi everyone, I'm Sakina. So first of all, I just want to say that I hope I don't offend anybody with the things I say. This is purely my experience, which I'm choosing to share. So apologies if anyone is or does get offended. So the main reason I chose to go private initially was I lost my dad at the beginning of January 2020, and he passed away from cancer, and it was literally within a 4 to 5 week process. We had the diagnosis to when he passed away, and there was a lot of negligence that had gone on. We were with my dad the whole time. We were lucky, this was pre-COVID, so we were able to sit in the ward all day with him and see how the doctors. There was a lot of negligence that happened, and the whole aspect really put me off the NHS. So a couple of months later, we went into COVID. I was blessed with having a lockdown pregnancy. It was a surprise pregnancy because I was still grieving the death of my dad. So when I found out initially I was pregnant, and with all this COVID stuff that was brand new to everybody, I was so nervous, very anxious, quite scared. And I remember my husband at the time said to me, let's have a look down the private avenue. There must be, we're in a nice part of the world where we can, afford to pay for these things. We were fantastic with the company we found. Literally spoke to Elsie on the phone, and I was so happy, so grateful. She kind of eased all my needs. She spoke to my husband first initially, then to myself. And we were just so happy with the whole process, that they would come out to the house, they would do the blood test, at any given point that I needed them, they would arrange everything for me. If I was ever nervous about the baby not moving, things like that. All in all, my aspect was that I did not want to go into the NHS hospital. I did not ever want to go there to have a scan. I didn't want to go there to have a blood test. And Elsie and Yvonne said to me, we will do everything we can to reassure you and give you the confidence of the things that you can do. If there is ever a point that you would need to use the NHS, it would be for a reason. We wouldn't ever just send you in. With this, it was fantastic. The booking process, everything was amazing. I was so blessed to have both midwives with me, and the whole process and journey was just amazing. As Elsie touched earlier on about the fact that, they were able to change times for me. I have 2 other daughters and my husband that were at home with me. They were always so accommodating. It was so lovely. My husband also took their mobile number. So if he ever had a question or I was too nervous to ask, he literally would just drop them a message, and they were happy always to give the answer. The whole process, it was lovely, as Elsie touched upon again, that they knew the whole family structure, they knew the whole process. They would come in, and it was lovely not having to explain everything to a brand new midwife over and over again. They knew what my husband did, they knew how the children were, and it was just so lovely that I didn't have to repeat everything. As a mum, I mean, this was my 3rd child, and you're still nervous. It's almost like people, in the NHS, when I had my 2nd daughter, they're like, oh, you've been through it once, but it's not. It's a different pregnancy, and as I've learned, each pregnancy is very, very, very different. And that's what I loved about Elsie and Yvonne. They never ever said to me, oh, you've had 2 children before, stop worrying. It wasn't. They gave me the reassurance and the confidence that I needed. Again, Yvonne and Elsie, they educated me about the whole holistic environment, about the birthing process. It was never, you've given, but it was just, I birthed my own child. That was passed on to Shahid, my husband. It was also passed on to my kids. So it was very calming and a lovely process, and it kind of eased all my stresses and my anxiety away. I didn't even put into the fact that I would ever go back to the NHS. I would have my baby at home with my 2 lovely midwives by my side that would always be with me. So unfortunately, it got to a point when I did have to actually go into the NHS. This was purely because I was nearing the 42 weeks. As ever, I was so scared, so anxious, because I kept saying to Yvonne and Elsie that I'm not going to be able to have the home birth that I so longed for and I so desired. It was never about having paid for it, because at that point the service I received already kind of paid for itself. I never had to go in for the blood test or anything. I needed an emergency scan once when I fell down outside, and Elsie and Yvonne arranged that for me at a private place. It was fantastic. I didn't ever need to go. So obviously, with me being so nearing the end, we had to think about maybe that I may need to be induced. So I went into the hospital, and I can honestly say, I mean, it's almost a year to the date that, you know, I had went through all this process. I went in, and it kind of makes me really emotional and upset even thinking, and even when I talk about it, it makes me very upset. I mean, I went in, I spoke to the midwives, and the first thing they said to me, oh, we don't have any record of you. You know, where are you? You're clearly, you know, pregnant. You're almost 40 to 41 weeks. You know, where have you been? I said, oh, you know, I decided to go down the private care with all COVID. I explained about my dad's death. And literally at that point, I became the woman that paid for private care. I had a white lady, a midwife in front of me, and she said to me, oh, don't you feel stupid because you've wasted all that money and now you're back at the hospital expecting our services? And I was kind of taken aback. I was already nervous being in the hospital, and I was like, wow, you know, oh gosh. And you know, you've got your mask on, you're pregnant, you're nervous. I kind of just kind of froze. So when she went back, you know, I could hear them talking back, and they were kind of laughing, and I didn't even get known by name. I was known as the person that paid for private care. Oh, you know, the lady number 2, the one that paid for private care. Yeah, she wants our help now. And I was kind of like, I was really upset. I remember texting Yvonne at the time and said, you know, I don't think, you know, that they like me being here. And she said, why? She said, you pay your taxes, you have all the right in the world. She said, Rahila, you know, you're educated, you know, you're confident, you can deal with this. And literally, you know, they came back in, and it was almost like the standard of care had changed for me automatically, just because I had another option. I remember sitting in that ward for like 2.5 hours, and in that process, this was the bit that was quite horrifying for me. There was a Somalian lady that had come in, you know, she was very distressed, you know, very anxious. I couldn't speak English, so they did get an interpreter on the phone, and the interpreter was asking questions. I had it on speaker so that she could hear as well, and the questions they were asking were just not relevant to the care that she wanted. The interpreter kept saying, you know, she just wants to know that her baby's okay. You know, she doesn't want to be induced. And I remember that the consultant and the midwife kept saying to her, no, we'll do you a sweep. We'll get you booked in for induction. There's no need for you to, you know, wait out this process any longer. And I remember that the lady was crying, and it was quite horrific to listen to. And it was just very, very strange affair that this was going on. I actually asked about it. I said, is that lady okay? They said, oh yeah, she's just stressing about nothing. You know, I don't get why she just doesn't get her an induction. She's over the 37 weeks. I don't get why she doesn't want the induction. And as that was going on, there was another Punjabi lady had come in. I'm not sure what race, but she was speaking Punjabi in the ward. And, you know, they were kind of just laughing, and the midwives were just not processing the service, what she was asking. She said she was really nervous. She said it's the first time she's come in from abroad. She's having a baby. I could understand because I can speak Punjabi. And I even offered to translate just to help calm her. And they said, no, you know, we go through this all the time. Again, all they kept offering was the same standard of care. It was, we're going to book you in for a sweep and we'll get you induced. That's all it was. At that point, I'd listened, and I remember texting my husband and Yvonne and said, I'm kind of very nervous that I think this is what they're going to do for me with the sweep. And so when they came back to me, I remember the English lady come back, and she said, you know, again, she emphasized the fact that how much money did I waste? She actually asked me, you know, how much did you pay? Why didn't you just come to the NHS? You know, you must feel really silly. At this point, I was just like, is it possible I could speak to a consultant? I consider myself quite educated and quite confident, but even in this process, I was really vulnerable. You know, I'm British born, and I was vulnerable. I was fearful, and I was so scared for my baby. I spoke to my husband on the phone, and I said, if they do offer me a sweep and an induction, should I take it? Because I'm really nervous. He said, well, speak to the consultant. So I spoke to a consultant. She came down. She was an Indian lady, and she spoke to me. She said, what are you doing here? She said, your baby is overcooked. You need to be induced. There is no need for you to hold out for the 40. She goes, you're not going to win a prize by having your baby any longer. She goes, you're over the safe period. Let's get your baby out. I looked at her and I said, and I explained, and then she said to me, do you mind can I ask a question as to why you've gone private? I explained about my dad. And I actually thought that an Indian lady would have sympathise with me. Maybe she would have understood the grieving process that, you know, as culturally we go through. And she did not. She said she literally was, and this is where I said to Elsie that the NHS kind of has made robots of midwives. You know, the care that you normally would expect to receive, that I was getting on one side from Elsie and Yvonne, who have both previously worked in the NHS and been managers. And I've got this lady in front of me who I thought would have been quite sympathetic to me, was just not having, she was a consultant. She said to me, I can do this, we can get a midwife to do a sweep right now. Why do you, what, you know? And I said, no, I need to speak to my, I need to speak to Yvonne and Elsie. And she said, there's no need. I'm a midwife. I'm a consultant. I know what to do. And I remember quickly texting Yvonne saying, look, they want to do a sweep. And she said, no way, Rahila, there's nothing wrong with you. Your baby's healthy. They've checked the movement. They've checked the heartbeat. Everything's fine. You do not need to have a sweep. If you would like one, I can arrange one for you when you come back home. I remember saying this to the consultant, and she just looked at me and said, so why have you actually bothered coming in? She threw the papers and she just left me to it. At this point, I was just like, you know, kind of like, I rang my husband and he said to me, it's up to you. Even he got scared because he said, look, we want the baby out safely. We don't want anything to go wrong. If you think the induction's the right thing, then do it. And it was only when Yvonne rang me back and she said, everything is fine. You can birth your baby at home. She gave me the reassurance. She helped me with the anxiety. And I was like, yeah, okay, I need to get out of here. As soon as I was leaving, an English lady had come in, and she'd been in, I think, a couple of days before with reduced movements. And she'd come back in again. The whole attitude change. It was all, hi, how are you? Oh, lovely to see you again. And it was like, as if the rest of us didn't count. You know, they even allowed her husband to come in at the time, which I thought, we was on high alert with COVID. He came to drop off her bags, was able to, you know, settle her in. And I remember thinking, well, why can't any of us have that? Like, I was just wanting to get out of there. So I literally left. And luckily, so thankful, so grateful that, you know, the day before my induction, I was able to have my baby at home with, again, Elsie and Yvonne. Everything was amazing. My husband was so calm. He didn't even need to worry. He was able to deal with the two kids during the night whilst I was contracting and going through the birthing process. And it was just beautiful. Yvonne and Elsie just knew everything, that, you know, even the fact that they could make themselves a cup of tea, they, you know, they could have a lie down in the living room. It was such a nice, holistic family environment. The girls knew, they weren't nervous about a new person coming in. And I just was so blessed. I remember thinking, because the Saturday before, I remember saying, I'm not going to get this birth. I'm going to have to go in. I'm really scared. You know, I'm really, really nervous. And I was just so blessed and so lucky that, you know, my beautiful baby decided to come on the day before. And the whole process was just amazing. Yvonne and Elsie didn't leave. You know, they'd already been up. I can't even remember. I think it must have been about 15 hours before they'd already been up. And then the baby's temperature was just slightly low, but nothing that needed any kind of hospital. And they literally stayed the whole, I think, about another 6 or 7 hours until the baby's the baby's temperature went back to normal. They also made sure I went in the shower. They said, you know, I said, no, you guys go home. I'll make sure I have a shower. And they said, no, we want to see you in the shower. I want to see you back in your pajamas and back into bed. And they literally walked me up, watched the baby, and it was just, I was so grateful. I remember having the shower and thinking, how have I done this? Like, I'll be having a shower freezing cold in the NHS when I've been so lucky to have this, and knowing that the midwives Elsie and Yvonne are looking after my baby, I was just so blessed. I remember crying so much in the shower, just thinking, oh, I'm really, really lucky. And I just remember thinking about those two women in the hospital, thinking, oh, you know, I hope they were okay, because they did in fact go for the sweep. And I just pray that they were okay. So yeah, that was the beginning part. And I thought everything, I was counting my lucky stars and thought, yeah, I'm really lucky. Everything's gone amazing. And then a couple of days later, I developed an infection. And I remember I rang Yvonne and I was crying, and Yvonne said, you need to go in. And I was so emotional. I said, I'm going to die. You know, I'm not going to come back. My kids are never going to see their mum again. I'd really don't, please don't send me to the hospital. I'm really, really scared. I remember crying that much that Yvonne actually cried back and said, I'm going to put Elsie on because she's she's the authoritative one, and she, you know, I feel for you here. I know what the kids are like. I know, you know, what daddy's going to be like, and your mom, even down to my mom and my brother, they knew the whole family, they knew the whole setup, everything. And I just kept saying, is there nothing else you can do for me? Please, can't you just come to the house and, you know, fix me? Can't you do anything? And she said, unfortunately, we don't have a hospital like that can provide that kind of service. And I just, you know, I was just so fearful. And I remember Elsie come on, she said, you have to go in, because, you know, this is life and death. You need to go in, you need to be seen in the NHS. And she said, I will do everything in my power to make sure that you don't have that experience again. And I didn't believe her, I'll be honest. I said, no, I don't believe you. You know, I'm not, this is really bad. I'm not going to make it. And she said, no, drive down. I've spoken to somebody. And the whole process, Elsie kept myself informed. And she also texted my husband, told him the runnings of that. I really need to go into hospital ASAP. You know, she needs to get in the car. You know, that this was, it was serious. So I remember as my husband was driving down to the hospital, he kept saying, oh, Elsie's texted me, you're going to be okay. Elsie, even right up to the point of the door, she said, this is the person you need to go and find. She knows everything. She knows the experience you've had before, and she knows you've had the private care, and you've come in. And literally, I will open the doors, and as I walked in, the lady said, oh, what's your name? Said, and she was an African lady, and she was so wonderful. And it was because of the communication that Elsie had given her that she treated me. It was almost like a home from home. She gave, you know, put me in the ward, did everything nice and calmly. There was no questions of why did you go private? How's your baby? There was nothing. It was just about the care for myself. I remember sitting there. I had to wait for a COVID test before I could be moved onto a ward to get some antibiotics. And I remember texting Elsie saying, thank you, you know, if it wasn't for your communication, had I just come in and my husband just brought me in as an emergency, I just fear that my life would have been completely different, because at that point I was already anxious, I was already nervous, you know, I was kind of an emotional wreck, and also grieving the process of my father still. And, you know, I was so blessed that I was able to have that communication with Elsie. You know, I didn't have to keep repeating myself over to different midwives. They already knew. And that's what the best thing about the whole process was, that Yvonne and Elsie knew. I never needed to repeat myself. You know, they knew everything about the birth. They knew everything about the process. And that's when I knew that when Elsie said to me, you need to go in, I definitely needed to go in. The process of care was amazing at that point, because I was blessed with one of an English lady who was there. And she actually openly said, I explained about my experience, and she was absolutely lovely. She said, I came into this to give a positive experience to women, and I loved the whole home, you know, kind of like the water births and everything. She goes, I was amazed when hospitals brought that in, and she said it's such a shame that all they keep pushing is sweeps and inductions. She goes, how many inductions women we've just been inducing during COVID? She goes, it's literally in and out. And she actually spoke to me for a while, and it was so refreshing. And she actually said, I'm so grateful that you've come on my shift, because it's lovely to have somebody that kind of knows. And it was only through the education of Elsie and Yvonne telling me that these are the things, you know, this midwifery should be about. It should be about the passion to deliver. You know, mums should be having that passion to deliver their babies. They should have the confidence. They shouldn't feel that they need to be subjected to racism in hospital, and the service shouldn't change. A woman giving a birth is a woman giving birth. It shouldn't be that you're Pakistani, you're Jamaican, you're African. It shouldn't be that you can't speak English. They should treat it with the same level of care. And it was lovely to see this from an English lady, because she just recently, you know, must have become a midwife, and she had the passion. And I just looked and I said, oh, do you ever fear that you may just become like the rest of them? And she said, yeah. She said, I would love to work private, but again, like Elsie said, she's got bills. She had young children. She had a mom and dad that she was also supporting at the time. And I was kind of lucky, because she actually knew Yvonne, and she actually gave her a call and kept her updated about my whole care. Again, as soon as I went up into the ward whilst having my antibiotics, it was just horrible. You know, I was in the ward, and there was women that had come in from cesareans, and literally all the midwives just kept saying to them is, when are you going to get picked up? And they were like, well, we've just finished. We've just come out of a cesarean, an operation 2 hours ago. And they were like, well, you need to get your husband, you need to start making your way. If you've got any issues, we're happy to accommodate you through A&E. And the whole ward was empty. There must have been about 4 or 5 of us. And there was loads of midwives, and the care was just horrific. But I was so lucky because Yvonne kept on with these midwives, made sure that I only needed to be in there as long as I needed to be, because she knew that I would get anxious and very stressed about my other daughters at home. And again, I'm ever so thankful that I had that communication. And this is the same thing that we had with my father, that it shouldn't be about who you know. It shouldn't be that Yvonne knew who to ring and Elsie knew who to ring. It should be that a midwife should be able to ring in a midwife with a referral that this person needs to come in. And it should be that they have that same level of care. And I myself was quite upset because, again, I'm British born, I'm educated, I'm lucky to be able to pay for the private care. But even I was subjected to that fear. I was so vulnerable. And I always say to Elsie that had it not been for your communication back when I had to go in with an infection, I actually fear for my mental state. I fear that, this would have had a knock-on effect for my family, for my daughters, for everything. And this is why I wanted to come in and just join and be part of this process, because I have 3 daughters, and I pray and I hope that when their time comes that they want to have babies, that they shouldn't be subjected to this. It shouldn't be about race. It shouldn't be about how good your English is, or how well you are off you are, because that doesn't actually make a difference. The NHS is just kind of got their own ethos of working. And the one part of the hospital where everyone would love to be is the midwifery side, because it's such a positive. You're coming out with, hopefully beautiful, healthy babies, and it should be a positive experience. All the other side of hospital, it's unfortunate the level of care that you're getting there is horrific anyway. But midwifery should be positive. It should be happy. It should be amazing. I just want to quickly touch on when I was about 17, I was my sister-in-law's birthing partner, purely for the fact that she couldn't speak English. So she'd come from abroad, got pregnant quite quickly, and she was very nervous. So she asked me to be her birth partner. I was 17 at the time, never saw anything at the time. And the hospital, I don't want to name them, but they were absolutely amazing. It was such a wonderful process. It was beautiful. They had music on, they knew everything. They knew her by name. They didn't put her down because she couldn't speak English. They didn't say anything. And they made sure that even when they were talking, even though I was interpreting, they didn't look at me. They were talking to my sister-in-law. And I just thought, oh, I can't wait to give birth. I'm going to give birth like this. She had a beautiful birth. And in the last 15 years, I don't know what's changed. I don't know. And obviously speaking to Elsie and Yvonne, it obviously seems that a lot has changed, because they're losing such good midwives. I always ask, would they ever go back? And they said, not unless, there's this kind of holistic environment, for, like birthing and, basically making it about the mum again. And that's basically why I just wanted to add my experience, because I would like to be part of some kind of change. And for not other people to have to go in. And having 3 daughters myself, I wouldn't want them to have that fear and that vulnerability, because it shouldn't be about their race. So I hope that my experience has enlightened a few people. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So thank you for listening.
Sakina, thank you very much for that. I just want to use 1/2 a second to emphasize the principles of our working in continuity of care. It's about developing therapeutic relationships with the person who is giving birth, using the best of evidence. So that is all the research evidence, plus the skills and the knowledge of the clinician who is giving the service, but also the needs and the values of the client. It's really, really important. And then the other part of it is, because midwives have a role, a specific role, when things move out of the role of the midwife, then she is obliged, she is required, or he is required to refer. Good communication, good networking, all round, in order to achieve the best outcomes for the client, the birthing person. So yeah, and Just my last slide then, because for us, success is not measured by what we bring, but because of what we leave behind. So thank you very much. I think that's the end of our presentation altogether.
Thank you, Elsie, and thank you so much to Sakina for speaking up today. No doubt your brave testimony of what you went through is going to help so many others. So thank you so much for a very powerful and very moving a journey that you went through with the birth of your last child. I'm just so very glad that you were able to find Elsie and Yvonne, and you had a good outcome with them. We're just going to ask a few questions now, if you don't mind. We do have a few questions and a few minutes. We've had many thanks from messages coming in to both Elsie and Sakina, so thank you. Sakina, you were very brave in talking to us today about what you went through, and I was just so moved to hear about the experience that you had and the disparity of the experiences that you had from your time with Elsie and Yvonne at home, and then from your time in the NHS when you were obviously admitted, and just your experience of what you witnessed with the mothers, other mothers on the ward as well. So what do you think are the core things that were really missing from the care that you received in the NHS and the care that you witnessed others receiving, that you did receive from Elsie and Yvonne?
I believe personally, I think it's the fact that there's no care. And I don't know if it's, for the midwives, whether the pay is terrible or the environment that they're working in, whether there's managers bullying midwives. It just seemed that they weren't happy to be there. And I think when you're in a position of care, that you need to be happy, you need to be content, so that you can pass that on to the patients that you're caring for. And it just seemed everyone was just really miserable and didn't want to be there. And I just think like you'll have one midwife who tries, and then she'll just get succumbed to the way that they have to work. I remember there was a time when I had to get checked for sepsis, and the lady was like very keen to just quickly get my bloods and get them checked ASAP. And another midwife came over and said, "Oh no, you can deal with this one in a minute. You need to do that one." And it was almost like you come in, and it was just the process of care. There was literally no attention to the fact that, you've given birth and what that brings. And, me and my husband were talking about this yesterday, that the rise in postpartum depression and a lot of women that are struggling with their mental health is because they have so much pressure. You've got these 9 months of stressing to keep this baby healthy. And then, if you've got added pressure from different midwives, which is why I was so grateful, because I never had to re-explain myself once to Yvonne and Elsie. They just knew. So I could imagine with my other two children, it was a different midwife all the time. So it's like having to explain the background again. And it's stressful. It's a hard process. And I think it would be lovely if the midwives just brought their passion as to why they came into midwifery in the beginning. And, it is going to take a few of them together to change. But I think it would just be nice to have somebody just to kind of push it forward, have that drive, not be nervous, have the confidence, so that maybe, the younger generation of midwives that are left can have the positive experience. And I think, I would love to have more children. And I only say I'm only ever going to have another baby if Yvonne and Elsie are there. But, you never know what the future holds. And I just think that it would be lovely. And I would like to help. And Elsie had mentioned that there's a hospital that's sitting there doing nothing. For people that can't afford to pay. I think, me and my husband always thought about, helping in any way we can for women. We always said we'd like to, maybe give financial support or, even gifts to help these women, just so that, I've been through an experience, I've seen it, and I just thought it kind of makes you think you're lucky, but then you feel for the other people that are not in that fortunate position. And it's hard. And that's why I can imagine Elsie, must be awake at night thinking, how can I make that change? Because she sees it day in, day out. So I think the main thing is just the attention and the care and the passion. I think they just need to get that happiness back in.
Thank you, Sakina. That's very helpful. We have a lot of midwives and midwifery students joining us today. So I think that would be a really good takeaway from many. So thank you very much. Elsie, we do have a couple of questions for you as well. You were obviously talking about the process at the moment of the NHS commissioning of the model. So what does that currently involve? What is it a funding process? Is it an approval process? Is it NHS far and wide, or is it trust specific? What does NHS commissioning really involve?
Well, the way the money works is we pay the taxes, it goes up to the Treasury, and then different sectors apply for funding. So the NHS commissioners receive funding to purchase various services in their locality. And one of the services is maternity services. So in order to provide, which is basically what we want to be, a provider of maternity services under the NHS, you have to speak to the commissioners. So it's really about redressing the disparities in maternity care. And we looked at the embrace figures, you know, the confidential inquiry figures, but it's far deeper than that, because the subtle morbidities, some of which never emerge for years and years, women cannot afford to pay. The women that we want to help can't afford to pay. So hence, we're working with another organization called Midwives Mutual. We've been doing this work for a number of years, speaking to commissioners, NHS Resolution, all sorts of people. And we're just sitting there waiting to act. But you know, as the slide talked about the cognitive dissonance, even though the evidence is clear, the money is there, the wants are there on both sides of the equation. It's just not happening. So, well, that's where we're at the minute. Yeah.
No, thank you. And the fight that you have, as well as many others that you work with, will no doubt pave the way for you know, someone to listen. You will be heard, and I just hope that you keep going on with your fight, and you'll get there. It will benefit so many. And I was very moved and quite alarmed, obviously, about hearing a lot about what you had to say at the beginning of your talk, and I think you would have touched many who are listening today. So can only thank you for talking to us today, Elsie, about everything that you've seen, everything that's going on. And I think if anyone else does have any questions, who didn't get a chance to answer today, or those who are watching a recording, please feel free to send them on to us at the webinar's email address, and I'm sure we can direct those to Elsie. So thank you. Again, I just want to say thank you to both Elsie and Sakina for sharing us for today. I'm sure you'll all agree that their insights were extremely moving and helpful. And to thank you all again for attending today's session. And as I said, there will be a recording that will be sent out shortly once the webinar has ended. So please feel free to share it with anyone who you feel would benefit from today. We look forward to welcoming you to our remaining sessions, the details again which can be found on our website. And I just want to again thank you for all coming, and thank you to our speakers, and goodbye for now. Thank you.